Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. Thank you so much for stopping by another video. So in this tutorial I'll be showing you how to make this long pencil dress with draped yoke and lacing at the back. So the pictures and video you can see on your screen is the inspiration for this style, and I'm just going to be showing you how I went about the process. So if this is what you're interested in, keep on watching while I get started. So these are the materials I'll be using for this project. I have my Ankara here. I have about 3 yards of this, 3 to 4 yards should do. And then I have my lining pieces, about 3 yards as well. I also have hairstay that I'm going to be attaching to the fabric and the lining. And then I have wording for the bust padding. So I'm going to start with the skirt part first. I'll fold it into two to cut out the front skirt first. So to know how much to fold, you just need your hip circumference measurement divided by 4, and then you need about 2 or 3 inches allowance. So I added about 2 inches allowance, but including the dart and all, 3 or 4 inches allowance should just be enough. And then for the length of this, the full length of this dress is about 60 inches. And now for the skirt part, I'll be using 43 inches, and then I will add 1.5 inches to the allowance at the lower part because I'm going to be turning it in with a lining. So in total I have about 44.5 inches for the skirt part. So I'll just go ahead and just trim off that border at the top there and take the rest of my measurements. I'll also go ahead and cut the sides out so that I can have a smaller surface to work with. Now to take the rest of my measurements, from the top there, I'll come down by 0.5 inches. So this is supposed to serve as the starting line, which is also the waistline, and the 0.5 inches is to serve as an allowance to attach the skirt part to the top. So now I'm taking the full length measurement, which is 43 as I said earlier, and I have an allowance of about 1.25 inches. And from that 0.5 inches at the top, I'm going to come down by my hip measurement, which is 8 inches, my waist to hip, and then still from the 0.5 inches, that's the line I'm starting from, the 0.5 inches at the top, I'll come down by my knee measurement, which is 20 inches, my waist to knee, 20 inches. I'll draw a straight line across here like this, and then I'm going to take my circumference measurement. So I'll start with my dart. So my bust span measurement divided by 2, which is 4 inches. I'll mark it on the waistline, and then I'll go out on that line by 0.5 inches on each side of the line. Then on my hip line, I'll go in by my bust span measurement divided by 2. This is just a basic dart, and then I'll connect the points together. Then still on this waistline, I'm going to go in by my waist circumference divided by 4. I will mark it there 8 inches. I would replace the dart intake, and I'll add 2 extra inches for allowance. So my waist circumference divided by 4, 1 inch for my dart intake, and 2 inches for allowance. On my hip line as well, I'm going to take my hip circumference measurements divided by 4. I'll mark it 10.25, and I'll add 2 inches for my sewing allowance. Now, for the knee area, you see the way I just placed my tape on the hip, including the allowance I added. I'm just going to lift my tape up and place it on my knee line just like this, and I'll mark the same measurement I have on my hip on the knee line. Then I'm going to further go in by 1.5 inches. So I'm taking in 1.5 inches on my knee. This is going to give it a penciled effect. So it depends on what works for you. You can use 1 inch, you can use 2 inches. It's still going to be okay, but this is very comfortable for me. So I'm going to connect the points from my waist to my hip, and from my hip to the knee, the 1.5 inches inward on the knee line. And from here, I'm going to take the measurement I have on my knee. I'll take it straight down to the end of the dress. So I'm trying to extend the line on the end of the dress here, and I'm just going to take the measurement straight from the knee. I'm trying to measure it so I can get accurate measurement. I'll just mark it on the full length, and I'll use my ruler to just take it down straight this way. Now this is basically it for the skirt, for the front part of the skirt. So I'll just cut it from the lower part on the side all the way to the top. And the next thing I'm going to do is to cut out the back part. And for that, I have folded another fabric here. I'll just fold it into two, just like I did for the front. And then I'm going to bring in the front part, the one I've already cut out, and I'll place it on top of the folded fabric for the back, making sure that I leave a distance of about 1.25 inches for my zipper allowance. So from that 1.25 inches, 1 inch is the actual zipper allowance, and then 0.25 inches is to turn in the lining, because I want the lining and the fabric, I want it to be fully enclosed with the lining, especially at the zipper area. So that I've extended the lines into the zip allowance, and now on that waistline I'm going in by half an inch. So that is to take zip bulge. And then on the hip line I'm going to go up by 1 inch, and then I'm going to go down by another 1 inch. So 1 inch upward and 1 inch downward on the hip line. This is to just give the back area some contour. Now I'm going to just shape in the waist. So from the 0.5 inches I went in on the waistline, I'll shape it to meet the 1 inch above the hip line. And now from the 1 inch below the hip line, I'm just going to take it into the knee area. Now on that knee line point there, I'm going to come out by 0.25 inches, and then I'll connect it upward to meet the 1 inch below the hip line. So this is to give it some contour, like I already said earlier. So the 0.25 inches I came out by on the knee is going to serve as the allowance to turn in the lining, just like I have already said. And now I'm just going to take it from that knee point straight to the end of this skirt part. So this is it for the back skirt. This is basically everything. I'm just going to cut through the zipper allowance area first, from the lower part there, following the curves all the way to the top. So you can see how it is curvy at this back part, the center back. And then on the side, I'm just going to follow the same shape I have from the front. You know, the front is placed on the back, so I'm just going to follow the shape I have there and just trace everything and cut it out just like this. And this is it for the skirt, the front and the back together. And I'm just going to go ahead and just notch the dart area, so it will be easier for me to sew it down when I am ready to sew. Now I'm also going to be notching this zip area just on the fabric here, so that I'll not be confused, because the two parts are curvy. The back and the side, the hip areas, they are both curvy, so I won't also get confused. That is just for the back pattern. And now I'm going to cut exactly what I've cut out here on my lining piece. So this is it here. I've cut out the front, I've also cut out the back, but this is the front. So I cut it the same length. This is the back here, the same length as well. And now I'm just going to be shortening the lining. So I want to turn it in and make sure the lining drags in some of the main fabric, so I don't have to hem it on the lower part. So now the entire length of this skirt part is about 44.25 inches, and then the main length is 43 inches. So I have some extra allowance of about 1.25 or 1.5. So I'm going to reduce this lining by 0.75 inches. So I'm just going to reduce it. I'm going to cut off 0.75 inches at the lower part of the lining. So just like this, I've cut it out now. So now I'm just going to open it up. I'll open the main fabric first, and then I'm going to place the lining on the fabric right sides facing, and I would sew it on the end there where I have just pinned, just at the end. And then after sewing it at the end with 0.25 inches, just a little, I'm going to take it to the top, and I'll show you that there's going to be some shortage, of course, because we cut out some of the lining. Now I'm going to drag the lining up to meet the very top of the main skirt. So I'll pin it down there, and then I'm going to go ahead and sew the sides. So after sewing the lower part, I would also hold the darts. I would sew down the darts on the lining and the fabric, and then I'm going to sew the sides. I would sew it at the lower part, I'll drag it up, and I'll sew the sides before I turn it inside out. So this is what I've just been talking about here. I sewed down the darts on the fabric and on the lining separately, and then I sewed the lower part with about 0.25 inches just here, and then I also sewed the sides, the two sides of the front piece here. And I'm just going to go ahead and turn it inside out. So as you can see, the lining has been able to drag the main fabric inside, that is to the wrong side, if I'm making sense. So this is it after I ironed it. I gave it a very good press, and then I also went ahead to sew the top, the waist area, just so that the lining and the fabric can just be in place. And then for the back pieces as well, I did the same thing I did on the front for these back pieces. Now I'm just going to take the measurements so that we can confirm if we are on track. So from the top, I'll come down by 0.5 inches, which was the allowance I kept at first. And as you can see there, I have 43 inches for the skirt part. So now moving on to the top part. So I have my basic bodice drafted out here. I have my starting line, I have my chest line, I have my bust point line, my under bust line, and my waistline. So I have taken my shoulder slope, my armhole curve, my neck width and neck depth, which is just 3 by 3 inches. So that's not really important because I won't be using the top part of this because it's going to have a draped yoke. So I'll first of all start by taking my bust span measurement so that we can draft the bustier. So I'll take my bust span measurement divided by 2, which is 4 inches. I'll mark it on the bust point line, the under bust line, and the waistline. Now I'll go ahead and draw a straight line across to connect the points together like this. Now on the waistline, I'm going to go out by 1 inch on both sides of that my bust span line. So I'll go out by 1 inch on one side and 1 inch on the other side. Then on the under bust line towards the center, this edge is like the mid front. I'll go out by 1 inch toward the center, and toward this side, I'll go out by 1.5 inches. So I'm going to connect this to the waist. So from the 1.5 inches, I'll connect it down. You can see how one side is slanted because on the under bust, it is 1.5 inches on the side part. Now I'm going to use my curve ruler to just take it to the bust point like this, just with a slight curve. And the next thing I'm going to do is to divide the shoulders. So on the shoulders, I will measure what I have there and I'll divide it into 2. So I'm just going to fold my tape so that I can get the midpoint here. And then I'm going to mark that point, the division of the shoulder, into 2. And I'll use my straight ruler to connect that point to the bust point on the bust point line. So just straight like this. Please pay attention to what I am doing. And now I'm going to go ahead and determine how I want my neck depth to be. So now this is going to be a sweetheart neck, so you can go how deep you want, you can make it as high as you want. But me, the measurements I'm going to be using on the bust point line, I'm going to go up by 1.5 inches. I don't want mine to be too deep. And then on this division where I have my shoulder meeting my bust point, I'm going to go up on that line by about 3.5 inches. So I just need this as a landmark to make the curve. So I'm going to connect from the 1.5 inches above on the midpoint. I'll just take it into the 3.5 inches on that line and I'll just blend it into the armhole just like this. I just use my curve ruler as a guide and then I use my hand to finish up the blending. So you can just use your free hand to make the curves you want. And then on that line, which is on the new neck depth, and on the line that the shoulder is dividing to meet the bust point, I went out by 0.75 inches on both sides of the line. So this is going to serve as like an over bust tightening for this dress. So now this is just it. Next thing to do is to take my side measurements. Now on this line, which is the neck depth, which is my chest line, let me just call it the chest line, I'm going to take my bust circumference divided by 4, which is 9.75. I will replace that over bust intake there, which is about 1.5 inches, and then I'll add 2 extra inches for my sewing allowance. So now the next measurement I'll take will be on my waistline. My waist divided by 4 is 8 inches. So I'll mark 8 inches there and then I'll replace that intake I have here, which is 2 inches. And then I'm going to add 2 extra inches for my sewing allowance. I know I'm adding 2 inches because I'm going to turn in the lining to be fully enclosed. So I'm going to connect these points together from my chest line down to meet the waistline. And the next thing to do is to take my side dart. So for my side dart intake is 1.5 inches. If you don't know how to calculate this, I've said this a lot in my previous videos, so please you can check that out. So I'll come down by 1.5 inches, which is my shoulder to waist on the front minus my shoulder to waist on the back. It gives me 1.5 inches. So I'll come down by 1.5 inches for my bust point line, and then I'll connect it to meet my bust span measurement at that midpoint there where all the darts are meeting. So I'll go ahead and close this side dart because I will not be sewing this on the fabric. I'll close it on this paper here. So I'm just going to use my hand. I'm not slashing. You can slash through one of the lines and then you overlap it and close it. I think it is easier that way, but I prefer doing this method. So I'm just going to close it down this way and I'll use a tape to just secure it down like this. So you make sure that the lines are touching each other. That is, the bust point line is touching the 1.5 inch below the line, the one we drew out for the bust dart. Now I'm going to replace whatever shortage that has been incurred from closing the dart. I've just replaced that there, and this is all. You can see how contoured is looking already just by closing the bust dart. I'll go ahead and cut it out from the lower part, then through the sides, and then I'll cut out the top just like this. So you can see how I blended it into the armhole and will not be using this top part, well, at least for now. So I'll go ahead and just cut out the dart areas as well. And here we have it. Our top front is ready. So I'm just labeling center front and side front. And then for this top part, like I said, we might not be needing, well, you're just going to keep it aside because it just might come in handy later on. So I'll go ahead and draft out the back pattern. So for the back here, I also have my basic bodice. I have my starting line, I have my chest line, my bust point, and my waistline. There is no underbust in the back part, right? So I also have 1.25 inches for my zipper allowance from the starting line, and every other measurement is going to start from that 1.25 inches zipper allowance. So I'm starting with my bust span measurement divided by 2, which is 4 inches. I will just mark that on my bust point and my waistline, and then I'll go out by 0.5 inches on the waistline. This is just a basic dart for the back, just a very basic dart. So I'll just connect all the points together like this to have my dart. And now the next thing to do is to take my body circumference measurements. So I'm going to start from my zipper allowance line to take all the measurements. So my bust circumference divided by 4 plus 2 inches for sewing allowance. On the waistline, my waist circumference divided by 4. I'll replace the 1 inch for my dart, and then I'm going to also add 2 inches for sewing allowance. And then I'm going to connect the points together. So I'll just connect it from the chest line all the way to the waistline. Now the next thing I'm going to do is to take my zip bulge intake. Now on this my zip allowance line, the entire thing I have is 1.25 inches, just like I said. So 0.25 inches is to turn in the lining. 1.25 inches is the actual zip allowance. So I'll go in by half an inch on the waistline. That's on this zipper allowance area. I'll go in by half an inch, and then I'm going to connect it all the way into the starting line, just up there. If there was like a neck depth, I would have connected it into the neck depth. So I'm going to further go up by 0.25 inches again. I like to do this whenever I have a half cut, so it takes off every other extra or excess zip bulge. So I'll go up by 0.5 inches, and then I'll use my curve ruler, the straightest part of the curve ruler. I'll just connect it into somewhere after the dart also, just to blend it in. At this point, I was just trying to use my marker to see if I can define the points or the lines that I'm trying to cut out, but it wasn't working. So I'm going to be cutting off from the chest line, which is 8 inches from the shoulder downwards, and then I'm going to cut all these other points that I have marked. So now this is what I'm just going to be using for my back pattern, the top back, and it is ready. I'm just going to label this back. The next thing to do is to cut this out on the fabric. So I have placed my fabric on a fold just like this, and then I'm going to place the separate pieces on here. So for the center front, I'll be cutting out one piece on a fold. For the side front and for the back, I'll be cutting out 2 separate pieces, but I'm cutting it on a fold, but they're going to be separate eventually. So for the center front, I'm going to just place it. I'll place the edge of the center front very close to the folded edge of the fabric, but I'm going to start with the back. I'll be adding 0.5 inches to the lower part of the back so that I can attach it to the skirt part, because you know this allowance is not on the pattern. And on the side, I'm not going to be adding any allowance to the side because there is allowance on the pattern. At the zipper area, no allowance because you know we already have the zipper allowance. And at the top of the back, I added 0.5 inches also, because I'm going to be turning it with a lining. So this is the center front. I'll add 0.5 inches to the lower part to attach to the front skirt. On the side, I'll add 0.5 inches, and at the top 0.5 inches. But you see the center front edge is on the folded edge of the fabric because it is going to be one piece by the time I open it up. Now for the side front, I'll add 0.5 inches to the lower part, no allowance to the side, 0.5 inches to this part that I'm going to be attaching to the center front, and also 0.5 inches to the top. So now that they're all cut out, all the pieces are ready here, I'm going to go ahead and cut it out on the lining piece. Exactly what I've cut out on the main fabric, I'm going to do that on the lining. And then I'm also going to be ironing hairstay on the main fabric and on the lining pieces as well. And this last white material I brought out here is called wording. I don't know another name for it. I'm going to be using this to pad the bust area. So you can use a bra cup to just, pad the bust area, but I'll be using wording. So I'm going to cut it out for the center front and for the side front, and it's going to stop at the under bust line. So I'm going to place it on a fold so that I can cut it out for the entire center front. I'm just going to trace it from the top there and then through the sides, and I'll cut it out at the under bust line just here. So now I'm going to be turning in lining for the front and the back pieces. So I don't want this wording, it is very thick, I don't want it to be like an obstruction. So I'm going to go down by 0.5 inches. I need my lining to turn out this fabric very smoothly, so I'm going to cut it shorter by 0.5 inches so that it doesn't really make it difficult for my lining to lay flat. So this is it here. So you're just going to cut it 0.5 inches shorter at the top. You get. So I'll do the same thing for the side front. I'm also going to fold the wording pieces. I'll place the center front aside. I'll fold this wording piece rather, fold it into two, just like this, and then I'll place the side front on it, and it's also going to stop at the under bust line, and I'm going to cut it shorter by 0.5 inches also. So this wording has like a gummy part. The way you attach your hairstay to your fabric, that is the same way you attach this wording to your fabric. So you just place it where it's supposed to be and iron it with a very hot iron, so it's going to stick and it's going to attach very properly. So that is how you attach this. As you can see here, I did not extend the wording to the very side of the side piece. Like, I didn't take it to the side. I stopped somewhere close to maybe the actual bust circumference measurement. I have about 4 inches allowance on this side, so you don't extend it to the very side. So guys, this is where I'm going to stop with this video as it is already too long. So in my next video, I'm going to show you how I sewed everything together, how I cut out the yoke, and how I draped it on the dress. I'm also going to show you how I cut out and attached the back lacing. So please do well to turn on your notifications so you get notified when I post that video. Thank you so much guys for watching up to this point. Please do well to give this video a like, also share and subscribe to my channel, and I'll see you in my next one. Bye.